Why are academics so out of touch? You ever wondered this? I know I have, and I'm in academia, so I think I'd like to tell you why. I think there are 3 reasons, and I want to begin with the first one. First, what does it even mean to be in touch? Well, to be in touch is to talk about the kinds of things everybody else is talking about. Doesn't really matter why, for what reason, how they came to know it, or anything else. All that matters is that everyone else is talking about something. To be in touch with it is just to be part of that conversation, and to be part in a way that everybody else would recognize as such. If everybody's talking about basketball and you say that you want to stab the ball, you're a little bit out of touch. But if everybody's talking about basketball and you talk about how you just watched the Lakers yesterday, you're more in touch. Simultaneously, though, if you just talk about basketball and you talk about the PSI and how high it could bounce as a consequence, and how we could run an experiment on that, you're out of touch. So to be in touch is to have a certain kind of knowledge and to say it in a certain kind of way. What is that knowledge? It's the knowledge of what everybody else is talking about. You know that they're talking about it, and you know what it is. These 2 things together, I call democratic knowledge. Democratic knowledge is the knowledge of democracy. It's the knowledge of people's own rule by themselves, finding the things that they find most interesting and intuitive for no other reason other than that they are interesting and intuitive. So you have a democratic knowledge of the demos, of the people, that it is popular. But then you have a democratic knowledge of what is popular, the thing they find interesting and intuitive. An academic is not often a man of the people. They can be, but they're often not. Why is that? Well, because they're out of touch. But using the language of democratic knowledge. If we think about this example of the guy talking about the PSI of a basketball, he's out of touch because he's thinking in terms that almost no one around him is familiar with. Maybe people do know what PSI is. I don't know. It's just a nerdy example. But suppose most people don't. I think that's a fair assumption. To say this in that way is to say something that actively excludes most people you're talking to. That's the first way within this very first thing that not having democratic knowledge and not expressing it makes you out of touch. By excluding the people around you, you come off like a fucking dope. That's not what we're talking about right now, and you need to get with the program of democracy. Not only do you exclude people and make yourself look like a dope, you also are pulling on a knowledge that's private to you. Democracy occurs in the public sphere. We talk to each other in a place where we can see each other and appear for each other. If you're all talking about basketball and the teams you like, and I mentioned PSI, that's not public. I made it public, but it wasn't already public. The only thing that was public was the notion of the game and what we all know about it. If I introduce principles that have nothing to do with the game, I'm just making you look like a fool. At least that's what I may think I'm doing. When in reality, everybody else thinks I'm the fool. If you're with your buddy and the teacher's going off on some tangent about how he fought in Vietnam, you both snicker at him because why the fuck is he talking about Vietnam? This is fucking math class. True story. So all of this is the first way that you be out of touch. You lack and fail to express democratic knowledge. And instead, you say some shit that nobody around you either cares about, knows about, or cares to know about. So you come off like you can't touch what they're saying. You're out of touch with it. Now, how does that happen? How does someone get to be in a state where they don't know what those around them are talking about, and they don't know what that thing even is? This is the second thing that makes you out of touch. When you specialize in anything, you imbibe words. You drink them up. You gotta read, man, and you gotta do equations a lot of the time, too. What does all that do? If you push up every day, your muscle is gonna be built further and further to deal with the resistance and pressure you put on it. That's how muscles grow. If you think in the same way every day, you will begin to grow the muscle that leads you to think that day. Or, as the famous neuroscientist Donald Hebb has said, neurons that fire together wire together. Meaning that if you think in the same way over and over every day, you're going to build a set of connections, and you're going to see the world in a way that's trained. In the same way, if you target your glutes, you're going to have some really fucking good glutes. If you target one side of your mind, you're going to have a really good one side of your mind. This, as a tangent, is the distinction between the modern scientist and the Renaissance man. Leonardo da Vinci didn't just train one side of his mind. He knew how to paint. He knew how to draw. Now, he didn't always finish his work. But he knew also how to fucking carve up cadavers and fucking create planes and shit. He trained multiple sides. And as far as I know, he was also pretty funny. So was Immanuel Kant. He's another good Renaissance man example. But anyway, if you are constantly training your mind in a certain way, you're spending time. And when you spend time, you incur a cost, an opportunity cost. You're putting all your time and effort into training, building connections to see the world in a certain way, because that's how everybody else in your field is also seeing it. And instead of looking out in the world and seeing what everybody else is doing, you're looking in to your discipline and your mentors and thinking to yourself, well, it's the fucking what they're doing, I might as well do it too. This makes you out of touch. Why would the guy in our first example even talk about PSI in a basketball? Well, if he was working in a lab all day, and this is what he's trained to think about, and probably what he's working with every day in whatever material science he's dealing with, that's the first thing that may come to his mind. In one way, it's a little bit sad. What we refer to as being out of touch is really being a mechanism for a knowledge production process. And this process reduces your mind to only that which you have been trained to produce, unless you're a Renaissance man. But how do you even get in this situation? So we've discussed two ways that you become out of touch. First, you say and do things that lack democratic knowledge because, number two, you've been trained systematically to not have that knowledge. You've instead been trained to think in terms of the discipline and incurred opportunity cost that's prevented you from staying in touch and up to date. But why would you ever want to do that? What's the point? Well, this is the third thing, and what really makes people out of touch. To be involved in a society or a community is to know not just what people are talking about, not just why they're talking about it, but both of these and how they're talking about it. I have expressed things to you in this video in a certain way. I've used certain examples, referenced certain things to get you to understand what I'm thinking. That's a skill, and that takes time to develop. If you don't think about any of this, and you are simply enmeshed in the society in which you live, never thinking about the what, the why, or the how, staying focused on the what in this kind of unconscious way, because you're just following what interests you. There's nothing wrong with this. Then you have no reason to develop any other communicative skill. You just talk about what you like, you find other people who like it too, and you all enjoy liking that shit together. It's easy. Just talk about the things you talk about the way everybody else is doing it. This is the reason a man's going to talk about football different from the way a woman's going to talk about shopping. Or a gay man will talk about shopping slightly different from the way a woman will talk about shopping. The socialization into the understanding of a certain thing to talk about is something you just do. And not only do you lose out on that by sheer dint of opportunity cost accrued in the second point, you now have to accrue another skill, which is the skill of translating between, going back and forth, the specialized knowledge you have and the public democratic knowledge of everyone else. But that democratic knowledge, and this is the real final point, is its own kind of science. It's its own kind of knowing, because it keeps everyone together. If everybody didn't talk about whatever sport or song they like in some similar way, there would be no fan base. Could you imagine if everybody had a different opinion on Charlie XCX's Brat? There'd be no discourse. No one would talk about it. It couldn't be popular because nobody would have anything to talk about. Everyone would know they're still the same song, not a question. But if everybody, hypothetically, was talking about it differently, nobody would be listening to anyone else, and there would be no conversation because there would be no two people sharing a common thing to converse about. So why then would someone want to opt out of this? Well, maybe they wonder why all of this even happens. How does that happen? How does this process whereby people learn to talk about things in a certain way, how does that occur? They might become a sociologist for that reason. They might think, what is it in my mind that makes me want to do that? They become a psychologist. Or maybe they wonder what it is in physical reality that makes any of that possible. They become a physicist. And so they learn a specialized way to talk about each of these things, a way that not everyone can learn because there's simply not enough time to know all the different ways of talking about these things. Again, unless you're a kind of Renaissance man. This is what makes you out of touch. Because you wonder about something else in a very specific, narrow way, particular to you, you lose out on the general democratic knowledge. You give up that time. So why? What are the 3 ways that make academics really out of touch? I want to recap them quickly. Let's go in reverse order. If you feel like the world around you is too general and you want to hone in on something particular, you specialize. If you specialize, you have to take up time, which takes time away from looking at the world around you and looking at what other people are saying. And when you do that, you lose out on democratic knowledge. Losing out on that democratic knowledge, you often fail to talk about it. And by failing to talk about it, you look like a dummy. You look out of touch. If you found this video interesting, please leave a like or a comment. This is just some private reflections as someone who's currently studying in academia and who's felt the very things that you are also yourself thinking and that I am currently expressing. Not only have I felt them myself, I've noticed them in other people, and I've never heard anyone in academia really talk about it, except a few sociologists here and there. Let me know your thoughts. Have you noticed this? Maybe you want to know how to bridge the gap between being out of touch and having democratic knowledge. I'd love to talk about that, but now's not the time. If you're interested in that, leave me a comment. Let me know why you want to know about this. Maybe you think there's a bigger social problem here that needs to be resolved. I think so too. If that's what you think, again, let me know. And maybe I'll make a follow-up. This is Mr. Amazing. Thank you for watching.